Welcome to another Mosaic tutorial. If you're a med student and you want great resources, head to mosaic.org. Today we're going to be talking about the facial nerve. It's pretty complex and we've tried to simplify it and make it as easy to understand as possible. So the facial nerve is the seventh cranial nerve. It comes off the brainstem at the level of the pontomedullary junction. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the functions of the facial nerve, and then we're going to talk about the course. So, the facial nerve is given its name from the fact that it innervates the muscles of the face, specifically innervates the muscles of facial expression. But that's only one of its four functions. And the easiest way to remember the four functions of the facial nerve is to think about what happens when something goes wrong with the facial nerve. That's why I've got this picture of Ramsay-Hunt syndrome here. Ramsay-Hunt syndrome is when you get inflammation of the facial nerve because of herpes zoster reactivating in the geniculate ganglion, which is early in the course of the facial nerve when all four fiber types are still present. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the problems people get when they get Ramsay-Hunt syndrome, and then we're going to link them up with the four nuclei of the facial nerve, each of which are the termination or beginning of the fiber types, and that's how you're going to remember the four nuclei of the facial nerve and its four functions. So the first problem that people have when they have Ramsay-Hunt syndrome is they have a facial palsy, as you can see. And the reason that they have that is because they lose the innervation. They don't lose the innervation, but there's a problem with the innervation to the muscles of the face. And those fibers derive from the facial motor nucleus. So the facial motor nucleus is in the brainstem, and it is responsible for innervating the muscles of facial expression. But it doesn't just innervate the muscles of facial expression. What it actually innervates is all of the muscles of the second pharyngeal arch, or the second branchial arch. And because it innervates one of the pharyngeal arches, which is a very kind of important embryological concept, because it does that, its fibers are called branchiomotor fibers. And they're also given another name, which is special visceral efferent. So this is a nucleus that has efferent fibers, and they're deemed special because they're going to all of the muscles of the second pharyngeal arch, of which by far the most are the muscles of facial expression. But there's also little things like the stapedius muscle and the posterior digastric and the stylohyoid muscle that are also in there. But basically the majority of them are muscles of facial expression. Now the other thing that these people complain of is loss of taste. And the reason that they complain of loss of taste, and it has to be to the anterior 2/3, is because the quarter tympani is sending special visceral afferent fibers up to the tractus solitarius nucleus. So the tractus solitarius nucleus is another of the four nuclei, and it is responsible for the fibers that give us our sense of taste to the anterior 2/3 of the tongue. When you've got Ramsay-Hunt syndrome, you lose that. The other thing that these people get is they get vesicles to the ear, and they get very bad ear pain. And the reason is because of the spinal trigeminal nucleus. The spinal trigeminal nucleus has general somatic afferent fibers. General somatic afferent fibers that convey a touch, temperature, and pain sensation from the outer posterior aspect of the external ear and external auditory canal. And when you have herpes, you get those kind of herpetiform vesicles over that aspect of the ear. Now finally, people with Ramsay-Hunt syndrome complain of dry eyes and mouth. And the reason is because of this nucleus. So this is the superior salivatory nucleus, and it has parasympathetic fibers. So these parasympathetic fibers extend outwards from the nucleus, and they go to ganglia that are ultimately responsible for innervating the lacrimal gland and the submandibular gland. And because they temporarily lose function, you get dry eyes and you get a dry mouth. So the facial nerve has 4 functions, and each one of those functions is controlled by a different nucleus, a different nuclei, so that there are 4 nuclei of the facial nerve. I guess an easy way to remember it is that each of the nucleus or nuclei can be kind of thought of beginning with S. So there's the 7th motor nucleus, there's the nucleus of the solitary tract, there's the spinal trigeminal nucleus, and there's the superior salivatory nucleus. Now, the only other thing to know about these is that I just want to emphasize that there's 2 afferent nuclei and 2 efferent nuclei. So the facial motor nucleus has its cell bodies sitting right here, and their axons are then projecting outwards. And the same for the superior salivatory nucleus. Its cell bodies are sitting here in the nucleus, and the axons are projecting outwards. Whereas for the 2 afferent fiber types, the nucleus of the solitary tract and the spinal trigeminal nucleus, their cell bodies aren't actually sitting here, and axons are projecting back to these places. So they're the 4 functions and the 4 nuclei of the facial nerve.